The secret of effective partnering is keeping your commitments. That's one of the 10 tenets of leadership. Hi, I'm Andy McCaskey of SDR News, and welcome to 10 Tenets of Leadership, and a special welcome to Larry Pendergrass.
Hi, Andy.
So we're going to dive right in here today. Tell us about this particular tenet and why it's so important.
Keeping your commitments. Yes, this is extremely important as all leaders. We expect others to keep their commitments to us, and we undermine that when we refuse or forget certain commitments to them. And this could be as small as a meeting or some deliverable of some sort. Sometimes we as leaders use the excuse that we're too busy and that was just somebody who reported to me that asked for that.
Why did you select the word partnering as the theme for this tenet?
Well, it certainly is about partnering throughout any business venture, and you as a leader are partnering with the people that are working for you, the people that are working with you, and your sponsors in all directions. In fact, it's important for us to remember that we can't have a partnership if we seem to be removed or apart from somebody else, and if people can't really depend on us the way we expect them to be dependable.
So you were talking about working in all directions. This is meaning up and down within the organization.
That's right. Yes, people say that, well, we're awfully busy leaders. We have all of this to do, but this is no more than we expect of other people. We need to focus our efforts in all directions, not just to the people that we're reporting to, not just our sponsors. We need to assure that whether we're talking about our peers or people that work for us, that we have the same level of commitment to our word as we would expect from others. Some people call this and other elements a servant style of leadership, where you have no more of an important job to do, you have a different job to do. Other people are depending on you to complete your tasks so that they can do theirs. And if you really want to show trust and respect for other people, as we've talked about in some of the other tenets, this is a basic requirement. You need to keep your commitments that you've made to others.
But this actually can become more difficult as you rise into the organization. Why is that?
Well, I think it becomes more difficult. It's mostly an internal way of thinking that causes it to become more difficult. We don't get busier than we were as, at least if you were a high achiever as an individual contributor. Individual contributors are extremely busy as well. What gets harder as you rise in the organization is maintaining the realization of everybody else's dependence on you, that you're not the boss or the orchestrator of everything. People actually are looking toward you to complete some tasks so that they can do theirs. I'd like to say a word, if you don't mind, here about the CEO disease. The CEO disease is something that was actually a phrase that was coined by John Byrne in Business Week in 1991. But you can read quite a bit about it in other works like Primal Leadership, which we'll talk about a little later, by Richard Boyatzis and Daniel Bowman and Annie McKee. In there, you will learn about how, as you rise in an organization, people are less and less inclined to give you real truth about how you're doing, give you feedback about what you're doing well and what you're not. And well-meaning people will still just be a little bit more reticent to tell you the truth. And that gets more and more difficult as you climb the ladder. So you hear less and less accurate feedback to adjust your behavior. The result can be that we become out of touch. And being out of touch, one of the ways we're out of touch is not understanding how other people depend on us completing the tasks, the thing that we're talking about here now, keeping your commitments.
Well, now sometimes that we'll talk about having yes men, surrounding people. But even if a manager makes an effort not to do that, he's still going to be subject to this isolation effect. Correct?
Yes, that's exactly right. We're not just talking about the situations that you might see amplified on television, where you have yes men or sycophants, I suppose, following you around. That's not the. It doesn't have to rise to that level of a problem for you to become out of touch and not necessarily have an accurate self-image. The only solution to this is to make sure that when you do have someone who is willing to give you accurate feedback, that you grab onto them and hold on to even their controversial statements and look for the truth in what they're saying.
Yeah.
I should say that there's a famous quote from Peter Drucker, a great business writer, that's one of my favorites. And he said once that the only true definition of a leader is one who has followers. And the thing is that with the CEO disease and the dangers that it can produce, including not keeping your commitments, you may think you have followers, but they may not be the type of people that'll follow you up that hill when the battle is really raging, unless you can show this level of respect.
It sounds like you might have a personal example that you could relate.
Well, actually, I can think of some great examples of leaders who have done this well. I can think one that comes to mind for someone I worked with that didn't do this very well is an individual who was a wonderful human being. I really enjoyed him. He was a very pleasant person. And yet, his biggest problem was keeping his commitments. He was completely undependable. And what this did is, in spite of the fact that he was a very smart individual, quite pleasant to be around, knowing that he didn't keep his commitments meant that everybody else was picking up for him. And it made him lose our respect. It made him lose followership. So this can be a real problem, and I've seen it happen. Leaders need to keep their commitments in the same way that they expect others to keep commitments.
Is there a particular reading or reference that you'd recommend as you think about this tenet of leadership?
Well, there are quite a few that I could suggest, but there is a small book that I picked up fairly recently that I really liked. It's called "Thank God It's Monday," and this is by Roxanne Emmerich, and it's certainly one that I think I could suggest that you read, that your viewers read. It's a fairly quick read and very pleasant book.
Well, in this tenet, we've talked about the essential skill of being able to make and keep commitments in order to keep followers within the organization. What are we going to be talking about next week as a tenet of leadership?
Next week, we'll talk about demanding constructive contention in your work groups.
Okay, and that's going to be an interesting one, I feel sure. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on 10 Tenets of Leadership.